Hi, everybody. I'm Oprah, and I'm really hoping that you're getting as much from this series as I am. And I'm so happy to have here today someone who has studied in the ancient Chinese religion of Taoism. And before I introduce him, for a better historic understanding and context, a little Taoism 101. Approximately 200 million people adhere to traditional Chinese religions, of which Taoism is considered predominant. It takes its name from the word Tao, translated literally as the way. It looks like Tao, but it's really Tao. Mm-hmm. And it's based on the Tao Te Ching, which was written over 2,500 years ago. And legend has it that, is it Lao Tzu?
Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu is the founder and the author of the Tao Te Ching. And it's comprised of 81 passages, 81. And according to my guest, it describes a way of living that's balanced, moral, and spiritual, and that works for all facets of life on Earth. So we're going to be talking about the Tao Te Ching today. But first, I don't even know how to begin to introduce you, because we were going through all the books that you have. I just say umpteen.
31.
Okay. Umpteen bestsellers.
Right.
Including The Power of Intention, which actually is my all-time favorite. Do you know who it is, listeners? It's Dr. Wayne Dyer. And he is here to talk about the Tao, which is his latest book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. So why the Tao? Why now? Why now the Tao?
Well, the Tao is one of those things that kept coming at me. It's I call it a calling, when you just keep getting sort of like synchronistic callings from, somebody would tell me about it, and then I had talked to someone who had been through a very difficult time with addictions and so on, and wasn't able to do anything in the program, but was just read the Tao every single day. And the only thing that seemed to work for this particular person and others, including one of my own children who has struggled with addictions herself, was in reading the Tao.
That's interesting, because, that whole controversy I had with James Fry, I don't know if you know about it.
I do.
But one of he says that was one of the things that also helped him, that struggling with addiction.
That was the person.
That was the person.
James called my daughter, as a matter of fact, and was willing to do anything at all to help her. I mean, he's someone that I have a great deal of love and respect for. And what he said to me was that I wouldn't do the program, I wouldn't do the 10 steps, I didn't want to substitute one kind of an addiction for another,
right? But
I would read the Tao. And then my publisher out in California called me and said, you've got to read this book, and you've got to do this, and every time I would turn on the television or something, I would be some kind of reference to the Tao. And I've gotten to the point in my life and in my career where I listened when these sort of things that start coming at you from a distance, and you're not quite sure.
That appears to be coincidences.
They appear to be, but there's
no such thing.
Yeah, there's no coincidence. In fact, the word coincidence itself is a mathematical term. You remember in geometry they would say two angles that coincide are said to be two angles that fit together perfectly. So now we've taken a term that means two things that fit together perfectly and interpreted it to mean something that fits together accidentally, which we've just reversed the whole concept of coincidence. It's coincide. So I called my publisher and I said,
I just had an aha moment. I never heard it explained that way before.
Really?
Thank you. Yeah, that was great.
So it's...
So the Tao kept calling you.
It just kept calling me and calling at me, and I would read a little bit of it, and I taught at a university. I even taught a little bit about world religions, and I taught about Taoism and so on, but I really wasn't really that familiar with it. And then I began to do the research on it, and most of the people who write about the Tao say it's the wisest book ever written. It's the most translated book in the history of publishing, other than the Bible.
Other than the Bible, yes.
Yeah, and there are 14,000 different interpretations or translations that I came across myself. And so I would read the very first verse. The opening line of the Tao says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. You can call things something. The minute that you call something or put a label on it, then it's no longer the Tao.
Yes, I was wondering, I was saying this to the producer of our show, that I obviously wanted to talk to you about it, but I was thinking, do you need to be further evolved along the spiritual path before you can begin to accept or receive the concepts of the Tao?
Not at all.
You don't?
Not at all. Some
really?
of the most common things that you say every day in your life came right out of the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah, but I know the whole idea of no rules.
Right. The journey of 1,000 miles
Yes.
begins with one
yeah.
step. Those who know don't speak. Those who speak don't know. Think small rather than thinking big. All of these kinds of comments and things have come out of this little Chinese man. I mean, Lao Tzu translates to old man. This old man that just had these visions about how to go about living our lives conflict-free, how to live without having any enemies, how to be at peace. You know what it really taught me, Oprah? Because I did it for a whole year. It taught me to think like God thinks. And that's my favorite quote from Einstein. You know, his whole idea, he said, I don't want to be consumed with the details. I'm just paraphrasing. He said, I just want to learn to think like God thinks.
Yes.
And so how does God think? And I began to see that God thinks without force, you know, makes everything happen without any force at all. There are no one is excluded. Everyone is included. God does nothing but give. It's always about giving. You know, Hafiz, the great poet from the 13th century, said that he was talking about, just about giving. He said, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. He said, just think what a love like that does. It lights up the whole sky.
Wow.
It lights up the whole sky. And it's just, so it's like if you can, you know, there's been so much talk about The Secret, you know.
Right,
I know you've done shows on it, and, I was asked
I wanted to
be a
talk
part
to you
of that.
about that. First of all, I wanted to ask you, do you feel somewhat validated?
I just feel so grateful and so thrilled that it's one of the most popular nonfiction books in the history of publishing. Over 10 million copies are out there. I mean, it's giving people a look at the power of what happens when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. I mean, the world begins to change when you change the way you look at it. I would have liked to have seen a little different emphasis myself. I think too much of it is on getting rather than giving. And if you have this incredible power to align yourself with a universal divine mind that is always giving and always offering, then it seems to me that's where we ought to be putting our attention.
Actually, I was surprised when I first saw, the first tape of The Secret. I was actually surprised that you weren't on there.
I was asked to be.
Okay, that makes sense, because I thought, well, you are the father of all this.
Yeah.
So, and why did you choose not to be?
I didn't want to be a part of that emphasis any longer, and that was really my
reason for doing Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life.
And it was really the result of my living the way I'm living now. The way I'm living now is on an island. It's in a place where I can just get as much validation from a tree or a spider or anything in nature. I mean, what Lao Tzu taught me is that God is in nature. And you have to find your own nature, and that in every single one of us, in every human being out there listening, we have a nature, and we know what that nature is, and we know what our calling is. We just haven't changed our thoughts to be in alignment with it. And this, what I want to do with this, and this is, to me,
this being Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life.
Yeah, this is about teaching people how, what they should be thinking. Become more flexible.
Right.
Become less rule-oriented. Become more open. Don't have any enemies. Lao Tzu was teaching all of us 2,500 years ago. This is the way to think and to have a moral word.
Don't talk about peace, be peace.
Right.
Don't look to be virtuous, be virtue.
Be humble.
Yes.
Be peaceful. Be loving. Be all of these kinds of things. Be serene. Be content. Stop trying so hard. Just get back, relax, enjoy. The next thing I'm going to do is on the dynamics of how to change a thought. Because most people know that what they should be thinking.
Yes.
They just don't really know how to go about changing the way that they think. It's like, because most of us, we have, 60,000, they say, separate thoughts every day.
Yeah.
60,000. But the problem is we have the same 60,000 we had yesterday, and we're going to have the same 60,000 again tomorrow. And we just keep repeating the same thoughts. And none of us ever ask the important questions like, is what I'm thinking true? Because the thought that it's going to be difficult to do something, for example, or it's going to be complicated, or it's going to take a long time, or it's a struggle, that usually, if you really examine that, there's no truth in that whatsoever.
So I'm talking to Dr. Wayne Dyer, who's really the father of the spiritual movement as we know it in our time. A lot of people call you the father of motivation, but when I was talking to you, you weren't just a motivational speaker. You were trying back in 1978 when I first
Was it 78? I thought it was 76. I
Yeah.
used to fly up to Baltimore every time there was a...
Yes, and talk to you when I was doing that little show called People Are Talking with Richard Scher. And we'd start talking about these ideas, which really started to open me up in a way that I'd never experienced before. What was the moment, the spiritual moment, and I use, the word spiritual carefully here. What was that moment that got you to see your own life differently, that opened you up?
I know exactly the moment. I know the date, the time.
Okay, tell me.
It was 1974, and I grew up in a series of foster homes and orphanages and so on, as you know. My father walked out on us.
Yes.
And he just abandoned us. He never paid any support. He just had 3 boys. My mother had 3 boys under the age of 4 before she was 23 years old, and she was just left. There was a depression. I was born in 1940. My brothers were born in 38 and 36, and I carried around deep anger and deep resentment and deep hatred. I dreamt every night. Rage is a good word, because at night I would wake up and I would be sweating, and I would meet him in a bar someplace, and I would be hitting, because he was an alcoholic and so on. And but I never was able to find him. I ended up in Biloxi, Mississippi, at his grave through a series of just the most bizarre circumstances. I rented a car.
That weren't coincidences.
Yes, exactly. And I was sent to get rid of this rage inside of me, because I knew that I came here to do something great. I knew that. I knew that when I was a little boy. I knew I could talk kids out of being upset at what was going on in the orphanage, for example. They always, when everybody would show up, they'd always say, "Where's Wayne? Go get them." And whoever it was, a little girl would be crying, and I'd say, "This is the greatest place in the world. There's no parents. You're going to love this place." And that's what I would just try to take the attention off of what they were, their anger and their fear and so on. So I always knew this. So I get to my father's grave. I didn't even know he was dead up until just a few months before, and his body had been shipped there. And when I went to the grave and I stood there at his grave, I finally said, from this moment on, this was after 3 hours of just stomping on the ground, I said, from this moment on, I send you love. From this moment on, I will no longer have any resentment or hatred or bitterness towards you at all. I never dreamt about this man again. I feel his presence very, very frequently. From that moment on, I quit drinking. Alcohol was no longer a part of my life. I lost the weight that I was, I changed my diet around. The right people began to show up in my life. And it was all about forgiveness, Oprah. It was just about, Mark Twain said that forgiveness is the fragrance the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And I understood it finally. I finally got that.
Say that again.
Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it.
Oh, that makes me want to cry.
It's so poetic, it's so beautiful. And I have never had an angry thought towards him or towards anyone else since that time.
In Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, Dr. Wayne Dyer's latest book, I think it's his 31 or 32 books, bestsellers, you say, for my father, Melvin Lyle Dyer, even though I've never known you, after thoroughly digesting the Tao, I finally get it! Exclamation point. It is and always was all perfect. I love you.
And I feel that. I feel him now. I feel him right here with us now.
How was it always perfect when he essentially abandoned you? How was that perfect for people who are listening? We're talking to Dr. Wayne Dyer about his latest book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And he lived for a solid year
Live the Tao every day.
Live the Tao every day. How was it perfect?
It's perfect because it taught me the most important thing that we have to learn in our planet, on this planet. It's about forgiveness. If you don't have something to forgive, in the Course in Miracles, it says if you haven't blamed, then there's no need to forgive.
Yeah.
So once you get rid of blame, once you get rid of your hostility, so in order for me to be able to get to a place where I could teach people about how to go through their life without bitterness and anger and tension and fear and hatred and all that stuff that we carry around because of the way other people treat us, I had to go through that experience myself. Everything that we went through in our life, we had to go through in order to get to this moment.
And that's why it was perfect.
It was absolutely perfect.
It was perfect for you.
Right.
I feel that way too. Being born where I was born, raised the way I was raised, everything, including the sexual abuse, the poverty, all of it.
Right.
Has made this moment possible.
Absolutely.
And therefore, it was perfect.
It was. I mean, I remember hearing you talk a couple of years ago, and you talked about your parents had sex one time?
One time.
One time in their whole life. One time.
In their whole life.
After.
Yeah.
And you were the result of that.
She was wearing a poodle skirt, and he wanted to see what was under it, he said.
Is that right?
Yes. She was wearing a poodle skirt.
I remember those poodle skirts.
She was wearing a poodle skirt. It was a pink poodle skirt, and he said...
it was under a tree or something?
And he asked to take her home after school, and they stopped by an oak tree. I think it's why I love oaks so much. I just am obsessed with oak trees. Don't even know what it is, why I'm so drawn to them. But anyway, under a tree, and he said when he took her to my grandmother's house, her mother's home, that she still had the leaves on the back of the skirt because they forgot to brush all the leaves.
And she was young, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was 18 years old.
18 years old. Mm-hmm. And that one, now how could that be an accident?
An accident or a coincidence.
Is something that fits together perfectly.
Yes, I often think about, look at all the series of things could happen. It wasn't even like they were friends. Mm. They happened to be passing at the same moment. Mm. And he said, hey, girl, what if she hadn't come out of that door at that moment? You know?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. If 1 second later, you know.
1 second later.
And that's why there's an organizing intelligence behind this, that's one of the things.
I know, that's what you talk about in this book. Is the organized intelligence.
Yes, and organizing it. Just think, I used to give the example of, just imagine for a second a junkyard. I mean, it's got 3 million pieces of junk. Yes. Just strewn every place, everything you can think of. Old toilet seats. It's got wiring and just the old generators and
batteries.
And everything that you can think of. The whole 3 million of them. A wind comes along, a 200-mile-an-hour wind comes along and takes all of this junk and twirls it around, and it goes up into the air, and it's twirling around in the air of this, this cyclone that goes by. The cyclone passes, and all the junk comes back down to the ground, and there's a Boeing 747, where it was just a field of junk before. What is the likelihood of something like that happening? 1 billion to 1, 1 trillion to 1? Could it ever happen? It takes an organizing intelligence to take all of these things and bring it together. And a Boeing 747 is nothing compared to a human being or compared to the universe, compared to all of those stuff. To think that this all is something that just happened because it was some happenstance accident, there is something called the Tao. And it says the Tao does nothing, but it leaves nothing undone.
Those who are listening and hearing about this for the first time, and there are a lot of people actually hearing this philosophy for the first time, is Tao more of is it a religion, would you say? Is it a lifestyle?
Lao Tzu.
Rules for living?
Lao Tzu hated rules. And if you were to call Taoism a religion to Lao Tzu, he would have laughed at you. He would have nothing to do with it.
Because it's not a religion.
It had nothing to do with religion. He had anything that had to do with rules of conduct and how to run your life. What he said about rules and laws and so on is that if you need rules and you need laws in order to be a moral person, then you're not connected to the Tao.
I know, but when I read that, I thought, well, oh my God, we're going to have anarchy. It would be craziness. It would be heresy. It would be if we don't have rules.
The anchor of the universe is located in every single one of us. Your children know what to do. One of my favorite things to say to my children always was, when they would ask, should I do this? What time should I come in? But my favorite response always was, you know what to do. You know within you the right thing to do. You know whether or not that you should come in this late or that late. You know whether you should eat that or not eat that. You don't need me to tell you that. It's about non-interference. It's about seeing the anchor of the universe is located in every one of us. I'm not talking about, there would be anarchy if some of us read it and then others don't read it, and then they begin to, impose it on other people. But if everyone understood that there's no concept of enemy, that we all come from the same place, and the 40th verse of the Tao, it says that the way of Tao is a return trip. We are all coming back. T.S. Eliot's famous line about, we shall not cease from exploration. But at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time. To know it for the first time. To know that you came from a place that has no beginnings and no ends, that is infinite, that has no boundaries, that just is. And that's, it's like you're doing nothing. You're doing nothing. You're being done. Let yourself be done in the way that God designed you to be, or the Tao designed you to be.
Okay. So All right. So how do you describe what it is? Because people need...
You don't get to.
You don't get to it.
Mm-mm. You don't get to, because that's the opening line of the Tao. The very first verse of the Tao. The Tao that can be named is not the Tao. As soon as you put a label on it, as Kierkegaard, the famous Danish theologian, said, once you label me, you negate me. I no longer am me. Once you put a label on me, I am a woman. You know, I am black, I am white, I am tall, I am Catholic, I am Muslim. Once you label me, you negate me, and now I must live up to whatever
that label is.
You have placed on me.
Yeah, what the expectation for that label is.
And the problem with labeling is that it creates conflict. It creates something that is and something that isn't. See, our minds are not capable of understanding oneness. And that Tao, that's why in the Tao it says, those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know. What Lao Tzu was saying there is those who know are connected to oneness. And when you're connected to oneness, you don't need to say anything. You just are.
So you spent a year. We need another half hour because we didn't even get into what that year was like. So next week I want to begin with the moment you decided that you were going to spend the year.
Oh, it was
when you said
year.
to your secretary, I want you to get rid of everything. I was thinking.
It was the day after I turned 65.
Everything?
Everything.
Everything? Wow.
All my clothes.
All your clothes?
I did my PBS special in bare feet. I said, I don't even have any shoes.
I know, I saw you in the PBS special with no shoes on.
Right, that's right.
That's because you didn't have any shoes?
No, that's not
what. Welcome back to our Soul Series. Dr. Wayne Dyer has agreed to join us for yet another conversation because I couldn't get enough of him. His new book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, went immediately to the bestsellers. That's always good, isn't it?
It's wonderful.
When that happens. And so the new book is about living the wisdom of the Tao, and Dr. Dyer was telling us last week that you actually decided that you were going to give up everything, including your shoes, all your clothes, all your belongings, for a year to live the Tao. But for people who are listening, it's not necessary to give up everything in order to live these principles.
No, I don't think you have to physically give up everything, but I think the more of what you own that owns you is a good thing to give away.
Right.
And I try to live by the 80-20 rule, which is, that 20% of what you have is what you use, and 80% you don't use. So to give as much of that away as you can.
Well, one of the reasons I really like this book, and I have really appreciated so many of your books, beginning with Erroneous Zones, and as I told you, The Power of Intention is also another one of my favorites. But one of the reasons I like this one so much, Changing Your Thoughts and Changing Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, which is currently on the bestsellers, is about all the chapters dividing into living with cooperation, living without sickness, living a God-realized life, living in heaven's net, living by bending, living like water. That was one of my favorites.
Water is, Lao Tzu is teaching us, find your God, your source, your spirit, your soul. Find it in nature. Look at how nature acts, and then replicate that. Think like God thinks. Think like
and water is so giving, so flexible, so
it's soft. It's the softest thing. It's like Lao Tzu again. The softest thing overcomes the hardest thing. Flexibility. The 76th. Do you have the book there? The 76th verse of the Tao is my favorite verse in this book, and it teaches us this. Is it okay if I do this?
Yeah, please do that.
76. Listen to this. A man is born gentle and weak. At his death, he is hard and stiff. All things, including the grass and trees, are soft and pliable in life, dry and brittle in death. Stiffness is thus a companion of death. Flexibility is a companion of life. That's a part of the 76th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Now, he wasn't just saying become stiff or become flexible in your body. He was saying become flexible in your thinking. In your, remember in the last election?
I read that, and what I felt when I read that is, it's not just in your thinking, it's becoming flexible in in the way you move. When I read that, I felt like it means flexible in all of your movement, in your thinking movement, in your emotional movement, in your spiritual movement. It means
being
fluid,
soft.
Fluid,
it means being gentle. It means in the last election during the debates with John Kerry and George Bush, one of the big things about this whole thing was flip-flopping. This whole concept of see a rigid thinking is a thinking. Emerson said a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. The idea that someone would believe something and say, whatever I believe on Monday, on Wednesday you can count on me, I'll believe the same, regardless of what happens on Tuesday, is a scary kind of concept.
Right.
You want someone who says, I believe this on Monday. Now look what happened on Tuesday. I have a whole different point of view here on Wednesday. That's not flip-flopping. That's living the Tao. That's how the universe works. It asks you to be soft, to be gentle, to understand that water is that great symbol of that. It flow. If you could, in your relationships, whoever you are, whatever, if you can just become like water, you can enter into any place in your partner's life mentally by being water.
Wow.
Because it just enters every opening. And you can become one with that person by being water.
All right. I don't want to run out of time again, because last week I wanted to talk to you about what that year was like, because in case you're just tuning in, I'm joined in the studio today with Dr. Wayne Dyer, who's written a great new book, his 32nd one, called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And for one solid year, he lived the Tao, gave up everything, all of his worldly possessions, including shoes. I keep coming back to shoes because hard to live without shoes. I'm thinking I could be naked, but I need shoes.
You need shoes.
What about all my Jimmy Choos? Oh, my goodness. When I read that, I was thinking, okay, I would give up everything? Everything. And what was that like? Okay, you tell your secretary, give up everything. She's selling, not even selling everything. You say, give it all away. Not even interested in making money. And then, how did you begin this process of living the Tao? So you had read the verses, you'd studied. Did you study all the 14,000 different versions?
I took the version that's in the entire Tao Te Ching is in this book. It's my translation of the Tao.
Yes.
But I took 10 of the most relevant ones to the West, to us here in America, to us here in the Western world, and combined all of the different ones and made it this version of the Tao Te Ching. So there's now 14,001 translations of the Tao. What I did is I made a year-long commitment. I started it on January the 1st, 2006. And I read the very first verse of the Tao. I divided 81 verses, right? 365 days divided by 81 comes out to about 4.5 days for each verse of the Tao. That's what I was going to do. I was going to spend 4.5 days on just each one of the verses. And at the end of the 4.5 days, I was going to write an essay, a very short essay. It only took me maybe 2 hours to write the essays because I didn't write them, Oprah. They wrote them. I do it by hand because, in the Tao it teaches you don't want to use machines. You don't want a machine to interfere with your writing. So
when you say the essays, it means, living with corporation, living the mystery, living all that.
Each one of those were short essays.
After each verse.
After each verse. But I spent 4 days meditating on each of the verses, like memorizing them, going through them in my mind, and then going out where I live on Maui and putting them to work, putting them to practice. And I can remember some of them were hard, Oprah. I mean, some of these verses are very hard. Here's the line. The Tao does nothing. It leaves nothing undone. That's like one of the great lines in the Tao Te Ching. So how can you do nothing and emulate? You're emulating the Tao. You're emulating God, the way God acts, God, soul, spirit, divine mind, whatever you want to call this organizing intelligence that allows, everything to be. All being comes from non-being, That's right out of the Bible, too, by the way. The New Testament came 500 years after the Tao. It's loaded with the Tao. It's almost all of that is in there. It's the spirit that gives life.
Okay, this is one I like. I was looking for this, the 20th verse. Give up learning, and you will be free from all your cares. Now, see, when I read that.
I know, you read that.
And I thought, how can I give up learning? Okay, but then continue. What is the difference between yes and no? What is the difference between good and evil? Must I fear what others fear? Should I fear desolation when there is abundance? Should I fear darkness when that light is shining everywhere? In spring, some go to the park and climb the terrace, but I alone am drifting, not knowing where I am, like a newborn babe before it learns to smile. I am alone without a place to go. Most people have too much. I alone seem to be missing something. Mine is indeed the mind of an ignoramus in its unadulterated simplicity. I am but a guest in this world. While others rush about to get things done, I accept what is offered. I alone seem foolish. earning little, spending less. Oh,
You know what the perfect example of a Taoist master, according to Lao Tzu, is an infant. Has no name, doesn't know its identity, doesn't know its color, it doesn't know its cultural background, it doesn't know how to hate anything. It just is. It just is. It just is. And that's, it's like the first 9 months of your life. We went back to your
That's
conception.
Right. You trusted God for everything.
Everything. You didn't say, oh my God, I hope I get a nose and I hope it shows up in the right place.
Yes.
And you was total, completely into surrender.
Yes.
Then you come out. Okay, at the 9th month, or that you pop out and you get surrounded by people who say, that's really good work, God, really good work. We'll take over from here.
Yeah.
And the minute you start taking over from here, what happens is you develop an ego, which is where you edge God out. E-G-O, you edge God out. Okay? And so now...
I never heard it that way before. That is so good.
Yeah. So you edge God out and you just push that to the side.
Good.
And what is this ego? What is it?
I'm going to be quoting you on that. Edge God out. That's what
it's an idea, Oprah. It's all it is. It's an idea that we carry around. You know what the idea of the ego is? It says, I am what I have. I am what I do. I am what other people do with me. I'm separate from everybody else. I'm separate from what's missing in my life. And I'm separate from God. Those are the 6 components of the ego. And that's what we're raised on and what we're trained on. Meantime, we showed up here. We didn't have to do a thing.
Oh, say that again. I want to say it again. Say it again. Repeat
the
that.
The ego.
Yeah.
The ego is just a collection of ideas that we carry around, okay? I am what I have.
I am what I have.
So we go around through our whole life, accumulating
trying
as much
to have
as we can,
things.
have more stuff. And then when we don't have any stuff, then we no longer are. We lose our identity. I am what I do.
I am what I do.
All of my accomplishments. I am what other people think of me. That is, I am my reputation. Those are the 3 major components of the ego that we spend our life training ourselves to become. I am separate from everybody else. So I am this body, and it looks different than you, so I'm separate from you.
That's right.
I'm separate
and I can be judgmental of you because I'm better than you, and you're not as good as I am.
That's what the ego is doing all the time. I'm separate from what's missing in my life.
Yes.
Now, if you understand that there's no place that the Tao is not, there's no place that God is not, then God has to be in you if there's no place that it's not. And it also has to be in everything that's missing in your life. It has to be if there's no place that it's not. So you're already connected to everything that you need in your life, everything that you could possibly want in your life. You're already connected to it.
Yeah.
All you have to do is align yourself.
But there has to be some purpose that the ego must serve. Otherwise, we would have evolved ourselves out of it. Don't you think?
No.
No? Okay.
I
thought that was a good question.
I used to think that.
Okay.
I don't think that
I'm not as advanced as you are, okay?
No, I think it's the ego is not worth defending. And we all spend a lot of our time defending this thing that says, well, I am what I do have, and I have to get more things, and if I don't have as much as they do, then they're going to... And we go through our lives doing all of this stuff, and what it does is it brings us to a point where we no longer have something, or our reputation is gone, or it's taken away from us, or somebody steals it, and what happens to us? Or when we retire, or, I no longer can do things, so now people get over a certain age, and they just feel like, I've declined and so on. There's nothing in the DNA that says you have to decline ever in your life. You don't have to decline, and your DNA is over 600,000 years old.
So then why do we have it, though? Why do we have it?
We have it because it works. It works at getting ourselves believing that we're better than other people instead of just allowing ourselves to be free. And it's like Taoism, the Tao teaches us to unpeel the onion, unpeel layers, to get to the essence of the Tao is emptiness. Getting to that place of emptiness. That's like the supreme place to get to, where you're just empty of all of that. And then you're free. And then guess what? All of the things that you wanted so desperately when you were so ego-dominated before begin to show up in your life in larger and larger and larger amounts. And what do you do with it? What does God do with everything that shows up? Gives it away. Isn't that what you're doing? Isn't that what you've learned in your life? I mean, here you are, this world-famous icon. And what is your major lesson? What did I see you doing on 60 Minutes or whatever it was when you were over there in South Africa?
Yes.
Give. God, I know why I was given so much. It's about giving. It's about, why do you have to wait till you have a lot to learn that? And why don't average people out there get that as well? All we have to do is see ourselves in everyone. Mm-hmm. The Native Americans, you want to hear a great quote. The Native Americans said, no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. Wow. Think about that. Think about it. We are all branches on a tree called humanity. What are we doing fighting each other and killing each other? What are we doing? Lao Tzu.
Because nature's smarter than we are.
Absolutely. And it's all about nature.
Yeah.
It's all about
nature's smarter than we are. So is it possible do you think you have your ego? You haven't lost your ego, obviously.
No, right? I haven't.
Yeah. But
I'm working on it.
Is there a way to keep it in check? Is there a way to minimize its influence in your life?
Every day, just say thank you. You know, and it's like, and get to the place in your life. You know, Rumi had this wonderful line. He said, you know, that to practice benevolence, to just practice being in a place in your life where you are giving. You're just constantly in a state of giving.
Okay.
You know, sell your cleverness, he said, and purchase bewilderment. Just go through your life in a state of awe, in a state of bewilderment.
Because everywhere you look, there's something to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're talking to Dr. Wayne Dyer about living the Tao, living the wisdom of the Tao. It's his latest book on changing your thoughts and changing your life. You believe it's possible for everybody to put their ego in a place where, you know, we talk about this spiritual evolvement, and every time I talk to people, some like yourself, people say, well, you know, the spiritual movement is growing to the point where there's something happening in the world. And then you look at the world. I mean, I just read something the other day where there are more girls who want to kill themselves now than ever before. So I wonder, is it just among spiritual folks, people who think the way you do, that, you know, the world seems to be getting better? Is the world getting better?
To me it is. Because I don't, you know, for every act of evil in the world, there's a million acts of kindness. So why would you continue to put our attention and our efforts and all of our energy on all of the things that are wrong in the world? Yeah. You know, the world is just fine. The world is just fine. Yeah. Yes, there are many things out there.
Isn't that what the evening news does? That's why I haven't watched the evening news.
And what is it sponsored by? It's sponsored by more and more pills for people to take to overcome all of the anxiety and the stress and the depression and
all the evil they're watching.
All of the things. It's like endless, amounts of attention on all the things that are wrong, and rely upon something outside of yourself to do that. All you have to do is become the observer to that. You become the witness to that. That has nothing to do with you. And one of the great lines in the Tao Te Ching speaks about that any time that you are in battle, if you have to go to battle, if you have to go to war, you don't ever celebrate anybody else ever being killed, no matter what you label them, whatever label that you put on them. You treat everything that happens in battle, which we see so much about, especially these days, as a funeral, as something that we recognize within ourselves that we left the Tao, because the Tao has no need for us. There's nothing in what God has offered us that tells us that we have to be in competition.
The other thing that you say that I love so much is about understanding that principle of every force is going to create a counter force. And I don't know if I can't remember if I read this in the book or heard it.
David Hawkins spoke about that in Power versus Force. He's a good friend of mine. Yes.
Yeah. Well, all the people I've interviewed over the years, it's good. Well, y'all must have some good dinner conversations.
I found that book, Power versus Force, years ago as a little self-published paperback, and I took it to every lecture I gave for 4 or 5 years until it became published. Yeah.
There was something you said that I'd read in an interview that I just loved, and I just wanted to quote you on yourself. When you were talking about what you were sharing with us here about the first 9 months of your life, how you turned everything over to God, and then you get born, and then your parents say, I'll take it from here, and where if you'd stayed in the God space, you'd be different. And then you say, how could you believe that you are not worthy of yourself? I just thought, oh my God, I wish more people could hear you say that. How could you believe that you are not worthy of yourself? Because you and I both, over the years, talked to thousands and thousands of people, and that seems to be at the core of what so many people don't get, that they are not worthy of themselves.
Because see, when you don't trust in yourself, you're not trusting in the wisdom that created you. That's like an insult to your creator, to the creative process, whatever you want to call that, if you want to call it God. Because, all of us and all the religions that are out there, they all pray to the same God. And then they ask this God the same God that everybody prays to divide itself up and argue against one person or another, or one point of view or another, when there's only this oneness. How could that which is perfect, how could that which is divine create something that isn't? You must be like what you came from. You must be. If I gave you a piece of pie from an apple pie, I'd say, what is it? What do you think it's like? You'd say, well, it must be like what it came from.
Okay, I'm about to be out of time again. Can you tell me what that year did for you? Can you summarize what that year did for you? First of all, I look at you and I already think, highly evolved spiritual person, being, living your life on a path of being able to connect to the higher self, knowing your own spirituality, a sense of connectiveness to the oneness of life. So what did you need to know in that year that you didn't already know?
I learned how to be joyful everywhere. I learned to be totally at peace. You know what I've learned, Lope? I've learned to think like God thinks, as close as I can get to thinking like God thinks. So I see myself, I see the unfolding of God in everyone that I meet, and I see myself in that person. Even sitting here now, I see myself in you, and I see you in me. And by being able to do that, there's no way that I could have any hatred or anger or bitterness towards you, or the waiter who doesn't come to me on time, or the flight that is delayed, or whatever's the circumstances that show up in my life. I'm able to see myself in all of those people who are just doing what they can do, and I'm able to be love.
And able to be love, that's it. For people for whom picking up their first Wayne Dyer book is going to be this book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, you know, for a lot of people at the beginning, it's like overwhelming. It's a lot. There's a lot to take in. What do you want to say to them?
It's so easy.
It's so easy.
It's so easy to be. It's just so easy. Just like, who was the guy that said, "Can't we just learn to get along?
Yeah,
can't we
that
just
was Rodney King.
Yeah, Rodney King.
Can't we all just get along
Can't
here?
we just love each other? You know, so like when I watch the evening news and I see so many insurgents were killed and so on, I go out to them, to each and every one of them. You know, I find that peace and that love within myself.
Wouldn't it be amazing? As I was reading this, thinking, as we move into this election year, wouldn't it be amazing to have Tao-centered leadership?
Oh, I think of that all the time, Oprah. That's what, you know, it's like, and that's coming. That's coming. You know, I mean, we pretty much know
who's Tao-centered and who isn't, but we'll leave that to another time.
Yeah, and all of us have the possibility to make that happen for ourselves. It's going to happen. There's no doubt about it.
Listen, I could talk to you forever.
Oh, I love you so much.
Thank you so much for the love. Thank you.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you, because we've been doing this a while, but no, I could talk to you all day. Maybe we'll do all day with Wayne Dyer.
There we go.
Yeah, take us a while. Thank you for joining me again.
Thanks, Oprah.
Continued success. Thank you. You're listening to Oprah and Friends, Oprah and Wayne Dyer here, XM 156. Talk to you next week, everybody.